Danny Carter sat alone in the corner of a dirty cantina, eating a bowl of something that looked like gray soup. He did not know what was in it. He did not ask. Food was food, and he had learned a long time ago not to be picky. The cantina was full of aliens. Big ones, small ones, ones with scales, ones with fur, ones with too many eyes. None of them looked at Danny. That was fine with him. He did not want to be noticed. Humans were not welcome in this part of the galaxy. The war had ended 3 years ago, but people still remembered. People always remembered. Danny was 34 years old. He had brown hair that was starting to turn gray at the sides. He had tired eyes and rough hands. He had been a combat medic in the United Earth Defense Corps for 8 years. He had saved many lives. He had also seen many people die. The war with the Velthari Empire had taken everything from him: his friends, his home, his belief that the universe made any sense at all. When the war ended, Danny did not know what to do with himself. He could not go back to Earth. There was nothing there for him anymore. So he bought a small cargo ship called the Meadowlark and started flying from planet to planet, taking whatever jobs he could find, moving boxes, delivering supplies, fixing broken machines, simple work for simple pay. He liked the quiet. He liked being alone. He liked not having to explain himself to anyone. But the Meadowlark was old, and old ships broke down. That was why Danny was stuck on this trading moon, waiting for parts that cost more money than he had. He had been here for 2 weeks now, doing odd jobs to save up enough credits to fix his engine. Danny finished his soup and pushed the bowl away. Through the dirty window of the cantina, he could see the marketplace outside. Aliens of all kinds walked between the stalls, buying and selling things Danny could not name. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. It was almost peaceful. Then Danny heard the explosion. He was on his feet before he even thought about it. His body moved on instinct. The same instinct that had kept him alive through years of war. He ran out of the cantina and into the street. People were screaming. A small transport ship had crashed into the marketplace. It had come down hard and fast, smashing through several stalls and sliding across the ground before stopping against a stone wall. Fire was spreading from the engine. Black smoke rose into the evening sky. Most people were running away from the crash. Danny ran toward it. He did not think about why. He did not think about the danger. He just ran. The heat hit him like a wall. The fire was getting bigger. Danny could hear the metal of the ship groaning and cracking. It would not hold together much longer. He climbed through a hole in the side of the ship. The smoke was thick inside, and he could barely see. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth and kept moving. He found them in what was left of the passenger cabin. There was a woman lying on the floor. She was tall and thin, with smooth blue skin that shimmered like water. Her eyes were closed, and there was blood on her face. She was breathing, but barely. Next to her, trapped under a piece of fallen metal, was a child. The child was small, maybe 4 or 5 years old. She had the same blue skin as the woman, but her eyes were open. They were large and violet, filled with tears and terror. She was crying and screaming in a language Danny did not understand. Danny dropped to his knees beside her. Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "I'm going to help you. I'm going to get you out of here." The child did not understand his words, but something in his voice made her stop screaming. She looked at him with those big violet eyes, trembling. Danny examined the metal pinning her down. It was heavy, but he could move it. He braced himself, grabbed the edge, and lifted with all his strength. The metal shifted. The child cried out in pain, but she was able to pull herself free. Danny scooped her up in one arm. She was so light, so small. She clung to him like he was the only solid thing in the universe. He turned to the woman. She was unconscious and badly hurt. Danny could see that she had broken ribs, maybe internal bleeding. He needed to get her out now, or she would die. He lifted her over his shoulder with his free arm. She was heavier than the child, but Danny had carried wounded soldiers through worse than this. He moved toward the hole in the ship, the child pressed against his chest, the woman over his shoulder. The fire was everywhere now. Danny could feel his skin burning. He could barely breathe, but he kept moving. One step, then another, then another. He burst out of the ship just as something inside exploded. The force threw him forward, and he landed hard on the ground, shielding the child with his body. The woman rolled off his shoulder and landed beside him. Danny lay there for a moment, gasping for air. His lungs hurt. His arms hurt. Everything hurt. But he was alive, and so were they. He sat up slowly and looked at the child in his arms. She was still clinging to him, her face buried against his chest. He could feel her small body shaking with sobs. "It's okay," Danny whispered. "You're safe now. You're safe." He did not know if she understood him, but she looked up at him with those violet eyes, and something in her expression changed. The fear was still there, but there was something else now, something like trust. Danny heard voices approaching. The local authorities were arriving. Medical teams. Security forces. They would take care of the woman and the child now. He gently set the child down on the ground. She reached for him, not wanting to let go. But he stepped back. "You're going to be okay," he said. "They're going to help you now." Then Danny Carter turned and walked away. He disappeared into the crowd before anyone could stop him. Before anyone could ask his name. Before anyone could call him a hero. He did not want to be a hero. He just wanted to fix his ship and fly away to somewhere quiet. He wanted to forget the war and the death and the nightmares that still woke him up at night. He did not know that the woman he had saved was a queen. He did not know that the child was a princess. He did not know that this moment would change the fate of the entire galaxy. He just walked away, alone, like he always did, and the little princess with the violet eyes watched him go, and she never forgot his face. 5 years passed, and the galaxy kept spinning. In the heart of the Cathari sovereignty, on a world of crystal towers and floating gardens, Princess Lyrian Valorath sat in her bedroom and stared at a drawing she had made. It showed a face. A human face. Kind eyes, brown hair, a gentle smile. She had drawn this face hundreds of times over the years. She drew it so she would never forget it. The tutors thought it was strange. The servants whispered about it. Her mother, the queen, pretended not to notice. But Lyrian did not care what anyone thought. She knew what she knew. A human had saved her life. A human had held her in his arms and told her everything would be okay. And even though she had not understood his words, she had understood his kindness. The Cathari people did not like humans. They thought humans were dangerous, violent, and uncivilized. The history books called them a young species that did not know their place in the galaxy. The war with the Velthari had proven how destructive humans could be. Millions had died. Entire planets had burned. But Lyrian had met a human, and he had not been any of those things. He had been gentle. He had been brave. He had risked his life to save 2 strangers, and then he had walked away without asking for anything in return. Why would he do that? Why would anyone do that? Lyrian spent years trying to understand. She secretly learned to speak the human language. She read their books and studied their history. She watched their videos and listened to their music. Everything she could find about humans, she studied. Her mother did not approve. Queen Cytheia Valorith was a proud woman who ruled over billions of subjects. She remembered the crash too. She remembered waking up in a medical center, being told that a stranger had pulled her and her daughter from the burning wreckage. She remembered the security footage, blurry and incomplete, showing a human male carrying them to safety. She had ordered her people to find him. They had searched for months. But the human had vanished like smoke in the wind. He had not registered at any port. He had not used any official transport. He had simply disappeared. The queen wanted to forget about it. She wanted to move forward. She wanted her daughter to focus on her duties as a princess, not on some phantom from the past. But Lyrian could not forget. She did not want to forget. She was 9 years old now, old enough to attend royal functions and sit beside her mother during important ceremonies. She was smart for her age, curious about everything, and stubborn in a way that drove her tutors crazy. One morning, the news spread through the palace like wildfire. The Galactic Reconciliation Summit had been announced. For the first time in history, humans and the major alien powers would gather to formally end all hostilities and begin a new era of peace. The summit would be held on Concordia Station, a massive space station built specifically for diplomacy. Delegates from dozens of species would attend. It would be the most important political event in a generation. Lyrian ran to her mother's chambers as fast as her small legs could carry her. Queen Cethia was sitting at her desk, reading reports on a glowing screen. She looked up when her daughter burst through the door. "Lyrian, what have I told you about running in the palace?" "Mother, I need to go to the summit." The queen raised an eyebrow. "The summit is not a place for children. I'm not a child anymore. I'm 9, and I want to see the humans." Cethea's expression hardened. "We have discussed this. Your fascination with humans is unhealthy. They are not what you think they are." "Armining, they are not what you think they are. You don't know that," Lyrian said. "You never even met the one who saved us. You were unconscious." "But I wasn't. I remember him. I remember how he held me. I remember how he looked at me. He wasn't a monster. He was kind." The queen was silent for a long moment. She looked at her daughter, at the determination in those violet eyes, and she felt something twist in her heart. She had never told Lyrian the full truth. She had never told her that she had nightmares too. Nightmares about the crash, about the fire, about the moment she thought she was going to die. She had never told her that sometimes, in the quiet of the night, she thought about the human who had saved them and wondered who he was. "The summit will be educational," Cethea said finally. "You will see how diplomacy works between species. But I want you to behave. No running off, no causing scenes. Do you understand?" Lyrian's face lit up like a star. "Yes, mother, I promise." The queen nodded slowly. "Very well. You may attend." Lyrian threw her arms around her mother and hugged her tight. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Cethea held her daughter close and tried not to think about what might happen when they arrived at the summit. She tried not to think about the human delegation that would be there. She tried not to think about the possibility, however small, that the man who had saved them might be among them. It was impossible, she told herself. There were billions of humans. The chances of seeing that one particular man again were less than nothing. But fate has a strange way of working. The universe has a sense of humor that most people do not understand. In the weeks that followed, Lyrian prepared for the summit with more excitement than she had ever felt in her life. She practiced her formal greetings. She memorized the names of important delegates. She studied the layout of Concordia Station, and every night, before she went to sleep, she looked at her drawing of the human who had saved her. "I'm going to find you," she whispered to the picture. "I don't know how, but I'm going to find you." Far away, on the other side of the galaxy, Danny Carter received a message that would change his life. It was from an old friend named Claire Nguyen, now an ambassador for humanity. She needed people she could trust for the summit. She needed people who understood what humans were really about. She needed Danny. He did not want to go. He had spent 5 years avoiding anything that reminded him of his old life. But Claire was persuasive. And deep down, Danny knew that he could not run forever. So he packed his bag, put on his old dress uniform, and boarded a transport to Concordia Station. He had no idea that destiny was waiting for him there. He had no idea that a little princess with violet eyes was coming to find him. The galaxy was about to change, and Danny Carter was about to become the most important human in history. He just did not know it yet. Concordia Station floated in the darkness of space like a jewel among the stars. It was the largest structure ever built by any species, a massive ring of metal and glass that could hold millions of people. It had been built as a symbol of hope, a place where enemies could become friends and wars could end forever. Danny Carter stood at the window of his small cabin and stared at the station as his transport approached. He felt strange wearing his dress uniform again. It was dark blue with silver buttons, clean and pressed. He had not worn it in 5 years. It felt like wearing a costume, like pretending to be someone he was not. Claire Nguyen had asked him to come as a medical liaison and cultural advisor. She said she needed people who could show the aliens that humans were more than just warriors. She needed people with kind hearts and steady hands. She needed Danny. He had tried to say no. He had tried to explain that he was not the right person for this job. But Claire was stubborn, and she knew him too well. She knew that under all his tiredness and all his scars, Danny still cared about doing the right thing. The transport docked with the station, and Danny stepped out into a world he had never seen before. The main hall of Concordia Station was enormous. Bigger than any building on Earth, the ceiling was so high that clouds actually formed up there, drifting slowly in the artificial atmosphere. The walls were covered with artwork from 100 different species. Lights of every color filled the air, and everywhere Danny looked, there were aliens. He had seen aliens before, of course. He had fought beside some and against others during the war, but he had never seen so many different species in one place. There were tall ones and short ones that walked on two legs, and ones that floated through the air. Some had scales, some had feathers, some had skin that changed color as they moved. Danny felt very small and very human. Claire found him standing in the middle of the hall, looking lost. She was a small woman with black hair and sharp eyes, wearing a formal suit that marked her as an ambassador. She smiled when she saw him. "Danny, you came. You didn't give me much choice." She laughed and took his arm. "Come on. I'll show you where the human delegation is staying. And try to relax. This is a peace summit, not a war." The human delegation was small compared to most of the others. There were about 50 people in total, including diplomats, translators, security guards, and support staff. Danny was introduced as a medical liaison, which meant he would be available if anyone got sick or hurt. It was a job that let him stay in the background, which was exactly what he wanted. The opening ceremony was scheduled for that evening. All the major delegations would gather in the Great Hall to hear speeches from their leaders. It was meant to be a symbol of unity, a moment when the galaxy would come together and take the first step toward lasting peace. Danny stood at the back of the human group, trying to make himself invisible. He watched the other delegations file into the hall and take their places. There were so many species he did not recognize, so many faces he could not read. And then the Kithari arrived. The Kithari sovereignty was one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy. They had ruled their corner of space for 12,000 years, building a civilization that made humanity look like children playing in the dirt. Their technology was advanced beyond anything humans could imagine. Their culture was ancient and proud. They entered the hall in a procession of flowing robes and glittering jewelry. Their skin was blue and smooth, their movements graceful and precise. At the front of the procession walked a tall woman in white robes, a crown of silver crystal on her head. She moved like water, like wind, like something that was not quite real. Queen Cytheia Valoreth, ruler of the Kithari sovereignty. Danny watched her with curious eyes. He had heard stories about the Kithari during the war. They had stayed neutral, refusing to take sides. But everyone knew they had the power to crush anyone who threatened them. To see their queen in person was like seeing a legend come to life. And then Danny noticed the small figure walking beside the queen. She was a child, maybe 9 or 10 years old. She had the same blue skin as the queen, but her eyes were different. They were large and violet, filled with a strange intensity that seemed out of place on such a young face. She wore a smaller version of the queen's robes, and she walked with her back straight and her chin held high. Something about her made Danny's heart skip a beat. Something about those eyes felt familiar. But he pushed the thought away. He was just tired. He was just nervous. There was no way he could know this child. He had never met any Kithari before. The ceremony began. The lights dimmed, and a soft music filled the air. One by one, the leaders of each delegation rose to speak. They talked about peace and cooperation, about leaving the past behind and building a new future together. Danny barely heard any of it. He was watching the little princess on the royal platform. She was not paying attention to the speeches either. She was scanning the crowd, her violet eyes moving from face to face, searching for something, or someone. Ambassador Claire Nguyen rose to speak for humanity. Her voice was calm and steady as she talked about the mistakes of the past and the hope for tomorrow. She talked about how humans wanted to learn from the other species, how they wanted to be part of the galactic community, how they were ready to prove that they could be trusted. Danny felt proud of her. She was doing a good job. She was making humanity look good. But then something strange happened. The little princess stopped scanning the crowd. Her eyes locked onto something, and her whole body went still. Her face turned pale, and her hands gripped the arms of her chair so hard that her knuckles turned white. Danny followed her gaze and realized with a shock that she was staring directly at him. Their eyes met across the crowded hall. The princess's violet eyes were wide with recognition, with wonder, with something that looked almost like tears. She was trembling. Danny did not understand. Why was this child looking at him like that? Why did she look like she had just seen a ghost? And then, slowly, the memory came back to him. The fire. The crashed transport. The woman with blue skin. And the little girl with the violet eyes. Crying and screaming. Pinned under debris. The little girl he had pulled from the flames 5 years ago. Danny's breath caught in his throat. His heart began to pound. It was impossible. It could not be her. What were the chances? But those eyes. He would never forget those eyes. The princess leaned toward her mother and whispered something. The queen's face went pale. She turned to look at Danny, and her expression was one of complete shock. And in that moment, everything changed. The entire palace delegation fell silent. The whispers began to spread. And Danny Carter, the forgotten soldier who just wanted to be invisible, found himself at the center of a moment that would be remembered for 1,000 years. The great hall of Concordia Station was full of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Kings and queens, presidents and emperors, leaders who controlled billions of lives and commanded fleets of warships. They had come here to make peace, to end centuries of conflict and suspicion. But in this moment, none of that mattered. Because a little girl had just whispered something to her mother, and the universe was holding its breath. Princess Lyrian Valorath could not stop shaking. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might burst out of her chest. For 5 years she had dreamed of this moment. For 5 years she had searched for the face that haunted her memories. And now, across a crowded room full of aliens and diplomats, she had found him, the human who saved her life. He was standing at the back of the human delegation, wearing a simple uniform with silver buttons. He looked older than she remembered. His brown hair had more gray in it now. But his eyes were the same, kind, gentle, the eyes of someone who would walk into fire to save a stranger. "Mom," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That's him." Queen Cethia froze. She had been listening to the human ambassador speak, her face arranged in a mask of polite attention. But her daughter's words shattered that mask completely. "What did you say?" "That's him, the one who saved us." The queen turned to look at her daughter, then followed her gaze to the human delegation. She saw a man standing alone at the back, looking as surprised and confused as she felt. Her breath stopped. Her hands went cold. She remembered the crash. She remembered waking up in pain, being told that she had nearly died. She remembered the security footage, blurry and incomplete, showing a figure carrying her and her daughter to safety. She had ordered her people to find that figure. They had searched for months. They had found nothing. And now, her daughter was telling her that the man who saved them was standing right there, in the same room, wearing the uniform of a human soldier. The whispers started almost immediately. The Kithari nobles on the royal platform had excellent hearing. They had heard what the princess said. They had seen the queen's reaction, and now they were passing the information along, murmur by murmur, like fire spreading through dry grass. The whispers spread to the delegations nearby. Aliens of all species turned to look at the royal platform, then at the human delegation, then back again. Nobody knew exactly what was happening, but everyone could feel that something important had just changed. Ambassador Claire Nguyen stopped speaking. She had been in the middle of a sentence about economic cooperation, but the mood in the room had shifted so dramatically that the words died in her throat. She looked around, trying to understand what was going on. Danny Carter stood frozen in place. He could feel the weight of hundreds of eyes on him. He could see the Queen staring at him from across the room, her face pale with shock. He could see the little princess gripping her mother's arm, pointing at him, those violet eyes swimming with tears. He wanted to run. He wanted to disappear into the crowd and escape through the nearest door. But his legs would not move. His body would not obey. This was not supposed to happen. He had saved those two people 5 years ago because it was the right thing to do. He had walked away because he did not want attention. He did not want credit. He just wanted to help and then move on with his life. But fate had other plans. The silence in the great hall grew heavier and heavier. The speeches had stopped. The music had stopped. Even the floating lights seemed to dim as everyone waited to see what would happen next. Queen Cithea rose from her throne. The movement sent a ripple of shock through the room. The Cathari Queen was one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. She did not stand for anyone. She did not walk toward anyone. People came to her, not the other way around. But now she was descending from the royal platform, her white robes flowing behind her, her silver crown catching the light. Her personal guards moved to follow her, their hands on their weapons, but she waved them back with a single gesture. The delegates parted before her like water before a ship. Nobody dared to stand in her way. Nobody dared to even breathe too loudly. Danny watched her approach. He felt like he was dreaming. This could not be real. This could not be happening. The Queen stopped in front of him. She was tall, taller than him by at least a head. Her skin was smooth and blue, her eyes like pools of liquid silver. Up close, she was terrifying in her beauty and her power, but when she spoke, her voice was soft. "You," she said, "you are the one." Danny opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat was too tight. His mind was too empty. "You saved my daughter's life," the Queen continued. "You saved mine. And then you disappeared. You asked for nothing. You took nothing. You simply walked away." Danny finally found his voice. It came out rough and broken. I just did what anyone would do." "No." The Queen shook her head slowly. "No one would do what you did. We were strangers to you. We were aliens. You could have died trying to save us. And yet you did it anyway." She paused, studying his face with those silver eyes. "Why? Why did you risk your life for us?" The whole room was listening, thousands of beings from dozens of species, all waiting to hear his answer. This was a moment that would be recorded in history books. This was a moment that would be told and retold for generations. Danny thought about lying. He thought about making up some noble explanation, some grand philosophy about peace and unity. But he was too tired for lies. He was too honest for pretty speeches. So he told the truth. "Because you needed help," he said simply. "Your daughter was trapped and scared. You were hurt and dying. And I could do something about it. So I did." The Queen stared at him. "That's all? That's your reason?" "That's all," Danny said. "Where I come from, you don't leave people to die when you can help them. It doesn't matter who they are or what they look like. If someone needs help, you help them. That's just what you do." The silence that followed was unlike any silence Danny had ever experienced. It was not empty. It was full, heavy with meaning and emotion. The Queen's eyes glistened. For a moment, just a moment, her mask of royal composure slipped. Danny saw something underneath it, something vulnerable, something real. Behind her, Princess Lyrian broke free from her attendants. She ran across the open space between the delegations, her small feet making no sound on the polished floor. She crashed into Danny's legs and wrapped her arms around him, burying her face against his uniform. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for saving us. I never forgot you. I looked for you every day. I knew I would find you again." Danny looked down at the little girl holding onto him like he was the only solid thing in the universe. His eyes burned with tears he had not cried in years. Slowly, gently, he knelt down and hugged her back. "I remember you too," he said softly. "I'm glad you're okay." And in that moment, something shifted in the galaxy. Something that had been broken for a very long time began to heal. The image would be remembered forever. A human soldier kneeling on the floor of the Great Hall, holding a tiny alien princess in his arms. A queen standing before them, her silver eyes full of tears. Thousands of beings watching in stunned silence. It was the image that changed the galaxy. Danny Carter did not know any of this. He did not know that cameras from every news network in the known universe were recording this moment. He did not know that his face would be seen by trillions of beings across 100 worlds. He did not know that historians would one day call this the moment when everything changed. He just held the little girl and let her cry. Princess Lyrian cried for a long time. She cried for the fear she had felt in that burning transport 5 years ago. She cried for the years she had spent searching for the face she could not forget. She cried for the relief of finally finding him, finally being able to say, "Thank you." Danny held her through all of it. He rubbed her back and whispered soft words in a language she did not understand, but somehow felt anyway. He did not try to stop her crying. He just let her feel what she needed to feel. Queen Sethia watched them. She had ruled over billions of subjects for decades. She had made decisions that shaped the fate of entire star systems. She had seen wars and famines and disasters of every kind, but she had never seen anything like this. All her life, she had been taught that humans were dangerous, young, reckless, a species that solved its problems with violence and destruction. The war with the Velthari had proven it. Millions had died because humans did not know how to do anything except fight. But the man kneeling before her now was not a warrior. He was something else entirely. Something she did not have a word for. He had walked into fire to save 2 strangers. He had risked his life without any hope of reward, and when it was over, he had simply walked away, asking for nothing, taking nothing, wanting nothing except to disappear. Why? She had asked him why, and his answer had been so simple that it almost did not make sense. Because you needed help. Because that's what you do. Was that really what humans were? Was that really how they thought? Was it possible that everything she had believed about them was wrong? The silence in the Great Hall stretched on and on. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The whole galaxy was waiting to see what would happen next. Finally, Princess Lyrian pulled back from Danny's arms. Her face was wet with tears, but she was smiling. It was the brightest smile Danny had ever seen. "I knew you were real," she said in perfect human English. "I knew I would find you again." Danny blinked in surprise. "You speak my language?" "I learned it for you," Lyrian said. "I read your books and watched your videos. I wanted to understand your people. I wanted to understand you." Danny did not know what to say. This little girl had spent 5 years learning about humans because of him. Because he had carried her out of a burning ship and told her everything would be okay. It was too much. It was far too much. But before he could respond, Queen Sethia spoke. "Rise," she said. Danny stood up slowly, the princess still holding his hand. He faced the queen and waited. Sethia studied him for a long moment. Then she did something that shocked everyone in the room. She bowed. The queen of the Cathari sovereignty, ruler of one of the most powerful empires in the galaxy, bowed to a human soldier. A gasp rippled through the crowd. The Cathari nobles looked like they might faint. The other delegations stared with wide eyes and open mouths. "You saved my daughter," Sethia said, her voice carrying through the silent hall. "You saved me. And you asked for nothing in return. In 12,000 years of Cathari history, I do not know of any act more noble." She straightened and looked out at the assembled delegates. "I came to this summit with doubts," she said. "I wondered if peace was possible. I wondered if humans could be trusted. But now I see that I was asking the wrong questions." She turned back to Danny. "The question is not whether humans can be trusted. The question is whether we have the wisdom to recognize goodness when we see it." This man showed more honor in a single moment than some species show in 1,000 years. If this is what humans are capable of, then perhaps we have more to learn from them than we ever imagined. Ambassador Claire Nguyen stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. She had known Danny for years. She had seen him at his lowest points, seen him struggle with the memories of war, seen him doubt his own worth. And now she was watching him become a symbol of hope for the entire galaxy. "Thank you, Your Majesty," Claire said. "Danny Carter is a good man, but he's not special. He's not unique. What he did that day is what any human would do. We take care of each other. We take care of strangers. It's not heroism to us. It's just normal." The Queen considered this. "If that is truly normal for your people, then perhaps we have been fighting the wrong wars all along." She extended her hand to Danny. "I would like to offer you something," she said. "A place in my household, as a guest of honor, as a bridge between our peoples." Danny stared at her hand. His mind was spinning. This was not supposed to happen. He was just a cargo hauler with a broken ship. He was just a man who had done one good thing 5 years ago, and then tried to forget about it. But looking at the Queen, looking at the little princess still holding his hand, looking at all the faces watching him with hope and wonder, Danny realized something. Maybe he could not run forever. Maybe he was not supposed to. He took the Queen's hand. "I would be honored," he said quietly. The room erupted. Delegates cheered and applauded. The Kithari nobles looked at each other in amazement. Ambassador Claire hugged Danny so hard he could barely breathe. And Princess Lyrian, the little girl with the violet eyes, smiled up at the human who had saved her life and whispered 4 words that would echo through history. "I knew you'd come." The summit was a success beyond anyone's dreams. Treaties were signed. Trade agreements were made. Old enemies shook hands and promised to build a better future together. But none of it would have happened without that moment in the Great Hall. Without a little girl's whisper. Without a soldier's simple act of kindness 5 years before. Danny Carter never did go back to hauling cargo. He stayed with the Kithari, helping to build bridges between species that had feared each other for centuries. He became a symbol of what humans could be at their best, and Princess Lyrian grew up to become one of the greatest leaders in galactic history. She spent her life bringing people together, breaking down walls, teaching everyone she met that kindness was stronger than fear. When people asked her where she learned that lesson, she always told the same story. About a fire, about a scared little girl, about a human who walked into flames to save a stranger, and about the simple truth that Danny Carter had taught her without even knowing it. That being human means helping others, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous, even when nobody will ever know. That's just what you do. And that, more than all the weapons and ships and technology in the galaxy, is what makes humanity worth knowing.